Adelaide is one of the Bulldogs' least favourite teams. After beating them twice in preliminary finals on the way to our 2 grand final wins, we also took the Chocolates in last year's exciting elimination final. While the Bulldogs' half-back line has been decimated by injury, Adelaide has arguably become stronger this year, boasting the competition's best forward line. Saturday's match at Etihad is set to be fantastic, with both teams likely to qualify for finals. This game is set to start at 7:40pm local time. I'm your host Scorpus, and this is the Crowcast Preview. Alright, with me tonight on the cast is Mr. Mystery Guest. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks, mate.
Yeah, I see you didn't do as well in the tipping this week as last week. Looks like you only got 5. Where do you go wrong?
I don't know. I can't even remember who I tipped last week.
You tipped?
I think what happened was I actually forgot. I actually initially forgot, so I didn't tip. I tip anyone for Friday night, and then realised after the game started.
Disappointing. Luckily, you didn't go as badly as Phoenix, who was on the cast last week. He only tipped 4, so he had a bit of a shocker. And I guess I'm topping the leaderboard at the moment, so we'll skip past the tips and go straight onto the teams. Adelaide has made 2 changes this week. Coming out is Laird with his toe issue, broken toe or fractured or whatever. And Jared Lyons pretty unlucky to miss. Coming in, we've got Ricky Henderson for his first game of the season, and Brad Crouch coming back in after 1 game in the SANFL. For Western Bulldogs, they've got ins of Jack Redpath and Caleb Daniel coming out, Kobe Stevens, which is a pretty reasonable loss for them, and Lin Zhong. Interestingly, Lockie Hunter, who was concussed pretty badly last week, has been named. There's been some rumours, I guess, that he might miss the game, but for now, he's in the team. Notable omissions across the board. There's a lot of guys out for Western Bulldogs. Of course, Murphy, their captain, out with his ACL. Johannesson won't be back for a number of weeks. Tom Boyd out with his shoulder. Suckling out with an ankle. And Cramery out with his drug cheating suspension. The last match we played was the elimination final in 2015. It's a pretty good match. We won by 7 points in an absolute thriller at the MCG. As we all know, Luke Beveridge had a bit of a whinge about Michael Talia, but didn't really have much of an impact on the results. Charlie Cameron kicked the match winner, Hendo 29 touches, Betts 5 goals, Dixon 5 goals, and some of the guys for Western Bulldogs that might not be playing, like Murphy, Hunter and Cramery, are all pretty important on the night. Mr. Mystery Guest, you happy with the changes? Brad Crouch coming in?
Yeah, I'm reasonably happy. I wasn't sure if we would give Brad an extra week in the SNFL. I probably would have preferred if we did that, to be honest. But I'm happy to see him come back in. I feel a little bit sorry for Lyons, though. I thought he was playing some pretty decent football. With Hendo, there was a lot of discussion. I much prefer Hendo being in than VB.
Yeah,
Hopefully, I noticed that VB is starting on halfback, so probably unlikely that he takes Seedsman's spot and Seedsman moves back. But I think it's more likely that Henderson takes more of Smith's current role and Smith moves more into the Laird role. It makes sense, rather than Hendo just coming straight in and playing the same role that Laird would. So just a slight shuffle, but not as much as what people would expect with Seedsman.
I think we'll have quite a few players rotating through the Laird role. Like you mentioned, I think we'll see Smith there. We'll probably see Seedsman as well. I actually rate Seedsman as probably the best defender out of the Seedsman, Smith, Henderson sort of group. But yeah, it seems like Don Pike, he probably doesn't want to change up the team all that much, considering Laird's only going to be out for 2 or 3 weeks, and Henderson has been playing in a similar role in the SANFL. So yeah, it's a pretty close to a straight swap, but there might be a bit of shuffling just depending on the defensive matchups that we're interested in having on the day. So yeah, pretty happy. I think Lions is pretty unlucky, but Brad Crouch is a better player, so it's just a bit unfortunate. And I know you were saying that it might have been good for Crouch to play another game in SANFL. The awkward thing about that is our next match next week is on Friday night. We're playing the SANFL on Sunday, so anyone playing SANFL next week or this week will only have that 5-day turnaround to Friday, and it'll be unlikely that anyone will be playing unless there's injuries. So yeah, just a bit of a tough call, I guess, on Lions, but we'll move forward. Matchups. We've got our pretty gun forward line going in against the Western Bulldogs weakened, I would say, back line. They've got probably Fletcher Roberts back there, along with Marcus Adams, Easton Wood, Dale Morris, Matty Boyd and Adcock or Biggs down there. And they'll be up against, of course, Walker, Jenkins, Lynch, Betts, Cameron and McGovern all playing this week. That last matchup against McGovern, maybe against Adcock or Biggs, looks pretty tasty. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I agree, definitely. I think that even the other matchups with talk about Walker this week, sort of getting over his niggling foot injury, so he's meant to be past the worst of that. So hopefully he can have an improved performance as well. You spoke about McGovern. I think they're the best best defense at the moment, and sorry, trying to clear my throat a little bit. Best defense, we're the best attack, and I like how we match up with them at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when we get a little bit later on into some of the Bulldogs' tactics, they really employ quite a defensive flood and lots of turning 1-on-1s into 2 or 3-on-1s. So if we can really get those 1-on-1s, Jenkins against Marcus Adams will be interesting. Lynch on Easton Wood. I mean, Betts on Morris. These are all matchups that could very well go in our favor if we can isolate those guys. So yeah, I think especially the strength of our forward line down to the 6th player, that's going to be a real struggle for them. On the other hand, they're playing in their forward line Jake Stringer. He's been a little bit out of form. They've brought in Redpath, who's kind of a tall forward. I guess he might be playing the Tom Boyd role. That's it. Campbell's still down there as the second ruckman. They've got Dixon, who's carved us up in the past, and Smalls of McLean, and probably Dalhouse rotating through there. We'll be going with our usual backs, including the 3 talls, Talia, Hardigan, Lever. I'm guessing that probably Brown will go to a Dalhouse or McLean, and Cheney probably to Dixon. Do you think we have the wood over them in the defensive area?
I think so, but I guess the big worry is Jake Stringer. He didn't do massive damage in the elimination final, but he tore hard to get a new one in round 4 last year.
Oh yeah, kicked 6 goals.
Sorry. He's the big danger man for this game, who we'll want to keep an eye on. Dixon kicked 5 in the elimination final. Obviously, he's dangerous as well. I think Cheney is probably a better matchup than Nick Smith, who played the majority of the game on Dixon last time. So Cheney's probably a better matchup.
Yeah, that matchup in the elimination final was not good. And I guess one of the differences is though, that we're playing Talia, Hardigan, Lever, and Cheney this time around, whereas in the elimination final, Lever wasn't playing. So that's why I guess that matchup was exposed. Yeah, definitely interesting to see what we'll do down there with some of their very dangerous guys. Of course, in the ruck, Jacobs is up against Ruffhead and Campbell. Not going to go into too much detail on this, but I think that's a pretty clear win for Jacobs there. Should get a lot of hit-outs. But the midfield, quite a tough battle this week. Sloan, Tomo, Matthew Crouch, Brad Crouch, Douglas up against Liberatore, McRae, Bontempelli, Wallace, Hunter if he plays. They've got a bunch of other guys rotating through there. Do you reckon we can win the midfield battle at all?
A challenge. Their insides are, I guess, surprisingly good. Does that make sense? I mean, from last year, a lot got talked about their running gun style, but their inside is pretty good as well. Their ruckmen are really only they've got two and we've basically only got one, but they're not exactly stellar rucks. And we've spoken about this almost every week about how Jacobs hasn't been in the best of form. So if he can step up again, that would give us a real chance in the midfield.
Yeah, I think Jacobs was better last week, probably had his best game of the year up against the two rucks from Fremantle, sorry. But yeah, I mean, I just can't see any reason why Jacobs couldn't dominate. That said, again, in the hitouts in the North Melbourne Western Bulldogs game, probably the best ruckman in the league in Todd Goldstein had 49 hitouts to 33 from the Bulldogs. I noticed a lot of sort of second man in or second man up or whatever it's called in those ruck contests. So it's kind of interesting to see how that'll go. Yeah, there's a lot of danger men. I think we've mentioned some of them in the past already, like Dixon kicking 5 goals, Stringer. I'd also probably nominate Dalhouse. He's done quite a good performance against us in the past couple of matches, usually having about 20 to 30 touches and kicking a goal. Yeah, we'll need to put someone on him, and yeah, if we can just clamp down on those forwards, I think we're in with the chance. Do you reckon anyone else has that chance of carving us up like we usually happens against us?
I don't ever remember the Bont having a massive game against us, but he's definitely a player who could.
Yeah, he's been playing a bit in the forward line. I think last week he kicked a goal, had 21 touches. So, yeah, I could see him definitely stepping up a bit over his performances earlier in the season. I think he's still been playing pretty well, but yeah, he could definitely be one to do a bit of damage. Just a bit more of a focus on last week. The Bulldogs, they won a lot of the key stats, so they actually won disposals by a pretty convincing margin of 79. They also won clearances inside 50s and contested possessions, but they only managed to kick a score of 45 points against the Kangaroos 61, so they didn't end up winning there. They had pretty poor disposal efficiency, especially out of the back lines. Not a lot of tackling pressure, very inefficient going inside 50, so they're really let down there. On the flip side, North's Tors were very damaging. They kicked 6 out of the 9 goals. Wade, who's in fantastic form, was particularly damaging. But none of the Bulldogs' tall forwards had an impact. So Stringer kicked no goals at all. He did a lot of really weird stuff. Do you think we'll see something similar with our tall forwards really taking a hold on this game and pushing a big score?
Serious chance, you would think. For me, I guess, at the other end, it just occurred to me. I remember seeing a stat for the North game last week about where the Bulldogs, their scores from, and a lot of them come from their small to medium forwards and their midfielders.
Yep.
And not many from their talls. So, and that's generally, at the moment, that's our big weakness is the medium and the smalls. So I guess that's the big danger for us, is that that's their strength and that's our weakness and that's how they'll get us. For us, we probably need to do what North did last week and have that extra height in our forward line and really punish them. McGovern, without having a proper matchup and his contested marking, for him to have a ish game, I guess. I can't see him being up there with Waite's game, but he could definitely have a big impact on the contest.
Oh, absolutely. He's probably going to be one of our most damaging players on the night. And yeah, those medium players, especially with Laird out, probably second best small defender after Brown, we could struggle back there, but just looking across like the actual players who kicked goals in last week's match, they had Kobe Stevens kick a goal. He's out. Dalhouse is always damaging against us. They had the Bont kicking 1, McLean, their small forward, kicking 1, Lin Jong also out. He's kicked a goal, and Tory Dixon with a goal. So if we can really clamp down on Dixon, McLean when he's in there, and Dalhouse, and of course stop Stringer, we'll have a really good chance. One thing I noticed as well watching that game is the big defensive flood that I mentioned earlier in the cast that the Western Bulldogs love doing. A lot of the time when it looked like North was going to kick into a 1-on-1 or a 2-on-2, the Bulldogs players just absolutely crowded up that forward line like you wouldn't believe, like 2 or 3 extra players in the defensive 50, turning, pack contests into absolutely horrific sort of crazy packs with so many players going for the ball. It's a very interesting tactic for them because they don't have those running halfbacks in their team anymore with Johannesson, Murphy, and Suckling all out. It's going really interesting for them whether they can, keep flooding the defensive 50, but having that still being able to manage that run out of their defensive area that will allow them to score goals. I mean, how big are those outs for them? It's huge.
Yeah, like you mean, just obviously they must be worried about those outs, and perhaps that's why they're going so much harder with the flood backwards, is because they know their efficiency moving forward won't be as good, and so have to be extra defensive now.
Yeah, and I mean, they like I said earlier, they had 79 extra disposals, but a lot of those were just trying to work through all that congestion that they created in the back line for them because they put so many players down there. And there was a lot of times when they would get just outside the 50 and then have to stop. They'd have to wait for their players to run forwards, and this of course also allowed North to run forward or back in their case for them. So yeah, if we can really, not allow all those over-the-top goals like we've been leaking this year, which has been an issue for us, and keep a lot of their defenders in check and kick goals from outside 50, which we've been good at doing, we'll have a really good chance, I think, especially if we can keep up the ball movement. But last week, we weren't in the best of form. Do you think we can turn it around?
I think so, but I guess it does relate when we're talking about the Flighters. We saw that a bit with Fremantle as well, and we didn't play particularly well, but they held back our ball movement a bit. I guess the positive is we still scored 97 points when they tried to really slow the game down. If Bulldogs try to do the same thing with us, what they did with North, and we kicked 97 points, we'll probably win the game, I think.
Yeah, definitely, especially considering the Bulldogs haven't been kicking significantly large scores this year. And as you mentioned, one of the things Fremantle did, apart from flooding their defensive 50s, they also flooded the midfield, which really choked us up a lot when we were trying to handball out of the congestion and out of the stoppages like we do to try and get to those outside players who then kick long and forward to the advantage of our forwards. I'm not sure whether the Bulldogs will do that, though. I didn't really see anything in the past few games from them that suggests that they like flooding the midfield. It seems like they're more concerned with putting some players behind the ball and sort of being able to rebound and slingshot like they've been so good at doing. Of course, some of their players are out, so it'll be a bit hard for them. But nevertheless, that's one of their big strengths, along with the stoppage work that they've been doing. So yeah, it'll be a tough one for us, but I think that we have the weapons to do it. Do you think they'll be able to stop our precision kicking and long kicking that we've been doing in the matches before Freo, if we could sort of get that going?
That's a good question. It will be definitely interesting. I think if we can, the quicker we move the ball, the harder it is for them to flood back. You would think if we're getting a run on, then they'll just sit a player behind the ball at before stoppages.
Yeah,
I don't really have, apart from just pure numbers. If we play it smart and sort of kick to the advantage of our tools, it's not that they can do to stop us, really. We saw Waite last week take a contested mark against 3 players around him, and they couldn't really get near the ball.
Yeah, I think that's one of the weaknesses of the defenders for the Bulldogs, is that they don't have that aerial prowess that some of the other teams do. Even our defenders are probably a little bit better in the air than they are, but they do love to spoil. So whether or not they can do that against us is another story. What about the fact that the Bulldogs have played their last however many matches. I think it's 7 in a row now at Etihad. They looked a little bit off the pace last week, not as able to run from the defensive 50 and not as able to spread when they wanted to get back or create options for their forwards. Is this an issue for the Bulldogs, having played so many games of that really hard and fast deck?
Yeah, I noticed that as well. I also wonder if it's, I guess they've lost a couple of their players off half-back, and so just in general they might just look a bit slower in terms of the pace across the ground. They did look a little bit sluggish, I guess, when they were running around. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and
I guess it's hard. Sorry, yeah, go.
Do you think Hunter will make it in this week? I mean, he could be like off the pace too, considering his concussion.
I don't know. Because I think someone said that he spent 24 with a delayed concussion. So
yeah, I think you just dropped out a little bit there, but you said 24 hours in hospital, right?
Yeah, I think someone on the board, he spent 24 hours in the hospital with a delayed concussion. Sounds pretty severe to definitely turn around and play on the weekend.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that they'd even consider playing him, but I guess if he passes the tests, then he's good to go. I mean, on the flip side, we have Sam Shaw who hasn't made it back this week from a concussion from weeks and weeks ago. So it's interesting to see those two approaches. So when it comes to the winner of this match, do you see us winning, or do you reckon the Bulldogs will be able to get us again like they did in round 4 of last year?
My tip this week is going to be us. Best on ground will be Talia, and he'll kick the winning goal in the dying seconds.
Did you say Daniel Talia best on ground?
Daniel Talia is going to drift forward in the dying seconds of the game and kick the winning goal. That's my prediction.
Really? That's an interesting one. So you're saying it's going to be a close one then?
Well, that's more my sort of dream prediction. But I think that just a little bit of pain to the Bulldogs. Just have a little bit of salt into the wound if Daniel kicks the winning goal. But
it would be painful.
With the most recent form, I think we'll probably win by a little bit more. Maybe 2 or 3 goals.
Yeah, I see us as well winning by 2 or 3 goals. I think there's a lot of talk about Western Bulldogs being a very good defensive team. We've talked about the flood a lot, but I can't see it being as tight as the Kangaroos-Bulldogs game, where Kangaroos only scored 61. I think we'll push that up a little bit more in terms of our attack, and I don't think the Bulldogs will continue their reign as the number 1 defensive team. So I'm tipping us by about maybe 3 or 4 goals. Best on ground won't be a defender. I don't think it'll be Daniel Talia kicking the winning goal. How many goals he kicked in his career? Probably like 3, and he's played like 100 games. Anyway, it's probably not going to be him. I'm going to go with Brodie Smith. I think we might employ a strategy of kicking a lot of goals from outside 50 to stop the flood being as impactful. So I'm going to go with his long kicking from the defence and kicking some goals from outside 50. He might be best on ground for us. There's a couple of other matches this round that are of interest. We'll start with the SANFL for us. We're playing North Adelaide on Sunday at 1:10 p.m. This is Mother's Day, so it's a little bit earlier. It's at Prospect Oval. It's live on Channel 7 if you wanted to watch our guys run around. Troy Menzel, he's back from his concussion this week. We've also got Lions coming in, of course, being dropped from the AFL team. Coming out, Brad Crouch, who was best on ground last week, arguably, in Henderson. One of our top-up guys, Spriggs, has also been omitted, so we'll probably see Spenceley perhaps back in there. Defence still undermanned with no Shaw, no Otten, and no Kelly. Do you still think that we have the goods to win this week, even though we lost by 1 point last week?
Well, I think North have improved a little bit this year from last year. I can't really see them beating us this week, winning this week though. Only lost by a point against South, and they're currently top of the ladder.
Yeah, and they had the issue. Well, we had the issue of we let them kick 6 goals against us in the last quarter. So I can't really see that happening, especially
I have no idea what happened there.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't at the game, but it sounded a lot like there was some sort of lack of pressure there and a couple of Hendo turnovers or something that might have, put the pressure off. But I think that especially with a guy like Menzel in, who will be, add that bit more class with Miller still in, that we will have the ability to win that game. Not much more to say, I think, because our SNFL team is still very dominant with our injury list at the moment. The other matches of the round, I think probably the most exciting one is Geelong versus West Coast, Saturday afternoon at Simmons Stadium. These are 2 teams in the top 8. Probably both of them we'll see in the finals. West Coast, pretty poor travelling team, really struggle away from home at the moment, and of course we know how strong Geelong is at home. I see Geelong winning. How about you?
The same. West Coast aren't quite at their best at the moment, so I can't really see them winning at Simmons.
Yeah, they've just had a couple of their forwards not being as impactful as they were last year. I think Josh Kennedy, his kicking for goal at the moment is worse than Taylor Walker, so don't know what's going on there. And they just seem a little bit off, and the fact that they continue to play a spud like Lewis Jetta is kind of interesting. I think he probably needs a run in the 2s considering his output, but really interesting for them. Geelong, of course, very strong. Dangerfield-Selwood has been great for them this year, unfortunately for us. And I really can't see the Eagles being able to get over them there. Probably a different standard of game also happening on Saturday afternoon is Collingwood versus Carlton at the MCG. This is kind of the spud matchup. 2 teams who are pretty crap going out against each other. Who do you think will win?
Probably Collingwood, based on past results. Although some of Collingwood's games this year, you would think it's pretty even.
Yeah, I mean, they've been crap.
Yeah, I guess based on the last couple of weeks where both Collingwood and Carlton have played at Essendon, Collingwood won by 12 goals and Carlton won by 3. So I'll say Collingwood by 4 or 5 goals.
Yeah, and Carlton has some pretty big outs, or at least one big out. Jacob Wiedering, he's going to be out for the next 1 or 2 weeks, I think. And Collingwood, interestingly, has omitted Nathan Brown, one of their key defenders. So it's interesting there. They've brought back Jesse White. Don't rate him at all, so I think he's probably kind of going to do a VB job and actually help out the opposition. But I think Collingwood's been very disappointing after their pretty good NAB challenge form. But Carlton, their list is awful and they're still not quite there. They might bring a bit more pressure than Collingwood, but can't see them getting over the line. Another interesting match again on Saturday. There's actually 6 matches on Saturday this weekend. Bit unusual there. Gold Coast versus Melbourne. This is at Metricon Stadium in the Saturday twilight slot. Gold Coast absolutely ravaged with injuries in their backline. Melbourne probably lost a game I was expecting them to win last week against St Kilda. They were in good form up until that match. I'm actually tipping Melbourne this week. I think they'll have the goods against Gold Coast at Metricon. I'm guessing you're probably tipping Gold Coast, though.
I am tipping Gold Coast. Melbourne have tipped Melbourne last week as well, but they seem a bit up and down at the moment.
Yeah, very much so.
Just away from home, I think that might give Gold Coast a bit of an edge.
Yeah, it certainly will be tough for them up Metricon, not playing at the MCG, which is I think where they've won all of their matches this year. I'm not quite sure on that one, but yeah, interesting for Melbourne. They're a team that I thought would still be a little bit worse than they are this year. They've been putting in some quite decent performances, but they very much remind me of Adelaide from a couple of years ago, where they put in a really good performance one week and then the next week they're just complete and utter shit. So it's really hard to tip them. It's also hard to tip Collingwood, so this will be a real interesting match for them. What about the Friday night match? A snooze fest between Richmond and Hawthorn. How much is Hawthorn going to win this one by?
depends. I guess it probably depends on how much effort Richmond actually put in. If Richmond turn up, they could make it a respectable scoreline. But from what I saw against the game against Port, they looked like they were just about ready to give up on the season. So
Yeah, I agree.
if they go in like that against Hawthorn, it could get pretty ugly pretty quick.
Yeah, so do you see any other matches this week being sort of like a certainty for one team or another?
No, that was going to be my main one. I think Sydney play Essendon this week.
Yes, they do at the SCG.
So you would think that Sydney would have been by a fair bit in that one.
Yeah, I agree. I think that'll be a smashing, as will probably GWS, even though they're having to travel over to the west to play Fremantle, and they've never actually beaten Fremantle. I still see that also being quite a significant margin to GWS in the way that they're playing. Did you catch any of last week's game, GWS versus Hawthorn?
No, I didn't. I only really saw one highlight, and that's when I think Bunting stopped Puopolo, and then GWS went end to end, and Johnson kicked the goal, and that was it.
Yeah, that was one of probably the plays of that match. Yeah, Hawthorn were well off, and GWS were really, really good, and I think they're looking like a finals contender at the moment, GWS. I think that the top 8 as it stands at the moment, which is North Melbourne, Geelong, Sydney, Western Bulldogs, GWS, West Coast, Adelaide and Hawthorn, I think that's probably going to be the top 8 at the end of the season, considering how the other teams outside the 8 are performing. Those other teams probably just aren't quite good enough at the moment. Do you reckon that the top 8's a lock from this stage?
It looks the top 8 current teams looking pretty comfortable at the moment in terms of the gap in between the rest. I actually looked at the AFL ladder predictor last night, and I went through, and I ended up with a massive gap between the 8th team and the 9th team. There'll probably be upsets during the year, but I thought it was a relatively realistic look, and I had Hawthorn finishing 8th with 16 wins, and I had Gold Coast being 9th with 11, I think.
Yeah, that's a huge gap.
So there's a huge
Hawthorn 8th.
Gap.
Oh, tough for them to 4-peat, yeah.
But that's with 16 wins.
Yeah, that's a lot of wins.
So normally
for
that would
8.
get you that would normally get you top 4 pretty comfortably. So probably won't quite happen like that. 8th will probably have something more like 14 wins. But I can see normally 16 is will get you fairly high up. I reckon this year to make top 4 we'll probably need something like 17 to get there.
Yeah, that's quite a lot for a top 4 spot. The only team outside of the 8 that I could really see pushing up into the 8 is Port Adelaide. I think they're pretty bad at the moment, but if they turn around their form, their draw is so easy that it'll be difficult for them to miss out. But I guess the issue for them is they've got a really tough run at the end of the season. So while their form's been bad, they've also been playing weak teams. So really you want to have your... Yeah, don't know what's going to happen there, but I think it's still a bit unlikely they'll make it. Right, I guess this brings us to the end of the look at the game versus Western Bulldogs on the weekend. Hopefully some of our Victorian guys will get down to the Bulldogs match at the MCG. Should be a cracker. I think everyone will be watching this on TV over the competing match at the time, which I think is that Freo GWS fixture. Don't think that'll draw the crowds that us versus the Bulldogs will. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter at BF Crowcast. We're also on Facebook, BF Crowcast. If you follow us there, you get all the updates about when we're going live and all the casts, and you can easily click through to our replays and everything like that. You can always chat to us. We're live all 3 casts every week. We're back live next week from 7:30 p.m. Adelaide time. Don't forget to review us on iTunes, subscribe, rate us, give us 5 stars, do all that good stuff. Rate our other cast too if you want. If you're wondering where last week's cast was for this one, the preview versus Fremantle, Phoenix went and deleted it for some reason. So Phoenix, if you're listening, nice one, mate, on that one. If anyone's got a recording, it'd be appreciated if you could send that through and we'll re-upload it. Otherwise, it's probably gone forever, unfortunately. But nevertheless, we'll move on. We'll keep recording. We'll be back live 7:30 p.m. next week. Phoenix will be on Sunday, 7 p.m. with the review cast. Don't forget to check that out. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll be back next week.
Boy.